They dazzled us on screen. Perfect smiles, sparkling gowns, and premieres where flashbulbs lit the night sky. But Hollywood's golden age had a darker script hidden just out of view. Behind those flawless faces were stars whose most painful roles never made it to film. These weren't scandals of affairs or broken marriages, these were children. Children born with disabilities in a ruthless era when image was everything and imperfection could destroy a career overnight. Some parents fought desperately to save their children. Others made choices they carried as lifelong wounds. What you're about to hear are the stories Hollywood tried to bury. The secrets of Golden Age stars and the children they hid, mourned, or loved in defiance of an unforgiving system. But Dorothy Dandridge's story shows us just how fragile the mask of perfection could be. Dorothy Dandridge shattered barriers as the first Black woman nominated for Best Actress. She graced magazine covers and red carpets, embodying elegance and hope. But in the early 1940s, her life as a mother unraveled. Her daughter, Harolyn, suffered severe brain damage at birth from lack of oxygen. Doctors said she would never speak, never live independently. Dorothy refused to accept it. She spent every dollar she earned on experimental treatments, doctors, clinics, even dangerous procedures. Nothing worked. The breaking point came in the late 1950s, during a live NBC interview. America watched as her dazzling smile dissolved into tears. "I can sing for the whole world," she whispered, "but I can't make my child call me mother." Soon after, crushed by exhaustion, Dorothy made the painful decision to place Harolyn in institutional care. Witnesses recalled her sobbing in the hallway, apologizing to her little girl as if she had failed. That guilt never left her. By the mid-1960s, the depression and pills became too much. Dorothy was found dead in her West Hollywood apartment. To the world, she was a barrier-breaking star. To herself, she was a mother who never heard the one word she longed for. And Dorothy wasn't alone. Another actress would be devastated by something as simple as a fan's sneeze. During the early 1940s, actress Jean Tierney was pregnant and visiting a military camp in New Jersey. She shook hands with adoring soldiers, smiling through the crowd. What she didn't know was that one fan had slipped out of quarantine with German measles. That single handshake changed her child's life forever. When Jean's daughter, Daria, was born later that year, she was completely deaf, partially blind, and living with brain damage. Tierney was consumed by guilt. She believed she had killed her daughter by stepping out of that car. Years later, fate delivered the cruelest twist. At a party, a woman approached her, cheerfully boasting, "I met you once at that camp. I was so determined, I sneaked out with measles." Jean froze. The woman had no idea she was the one who had destroyed an innocent child's future. The guilt crushed Jean. Hospitalizations, electroshock therapy, and decades of depression followed. Once called the most beautiful woman in Hollywood, she could barely face a camera. Her haunting confession still echoes. "I can play hundreds of roles, but I can't play the role of a mother." But one actor did what almost no star dared. He broke Hollywood's silence. On screen, Lloyd Nolan was Hollywood's tough detective, the man who always solved the case. But his greatest mystery wasn't in a script, it was his son, Jay. In the 1940s, autism was a word few people even knew. Doctors told Nolan his son was defective. The studio whispered one thing: hide him. Instead, Nolan did the unthinkable. In the early 1960s, he stood before reporters from the New York Times and CBS and said, "I have been powerless before my son's suffering. Perhaps God has too." The room fell silent. Reporters admitted they cried. Rather than retreat, Nolan became a pioneer. He co-founded the National Society for Autistic Children, lobbying for awareness and funding. In an era when silence was survival, Nolan chose truth. His career took hits, but his courage planted seeds that helped thousands of families. Others, however, chose deception secrets so elaborate they scarred their children forever. Loretta Young was Hollywood's angel, devout, moral, adored. Clark Gable was the king of Hollywood, Their affair in the mid-1930s produced a daughter Loretta couldn't admit existed. In secret, she gave birth to Judy Lewis, then staged an adoption of her own baby. To the public, Judy was a kindly orphan Loretta had rescued. But Judy bore one unmistakable mark: her father's ears. Clark Gable's ears. At age 7, Loretta forced her daughter to undergo painful surgery to pin them back. Judy grew up surrounded by wealth, but starved of warmth. The truth wasn't revealed to her until the late 1960s, when insiders finally told her who her father really was. Her memoir's title said it all: Uncommon Knowledge. She wrote, "I cried for days. I felt betrayed. I was the child of shame." If Loretta and Clark's deception scarred Judy, Paul Newman's tragedy was different: a father haunted by the shadow of his own success. Paul Newman. Those piercing blue eyes, that magnetic smile, the icon of cool. Beside him, Joanne Woodward, graceful and radiant, was the picture of Hollywood's perfect marriage. But behind the laughter and long-lasting romance was a tragedy that fame couldn't shield. In the early 1950s, Paul welcomed his first son, Scott. From the start, Scott struggled with school. Words and letters slipped away from him, likely undiagnosed dyslexia. As Paul's career soared in the 1960s, Cool Hand Luke, Butch Cassidy, and the Sundance Kid Scott felt crushed by the comparison. Friends remembered him sighing in bars. "Everyone knows my father is Paul Newman, but no one knows who I am." That shadow grew heavier. What began as drinking turned into drugs. By the late 1970s, at just 28, Scott was gone. An overdose of alcohol and pills in a Los Angeles hotel room. Paul Newman collapsed, sobbing into Joanne's arms. The man who rarely showed weakness was destroyed. Out of grief, Paul and Joanne created the Scott Newman Center to fight substance abuse, hoping their son's name would save others. But the wound never closed. Joanne once admitted quietly, "This house has Oscars, but it will always be missing one voice." While Paul was haunted by loss, another star transformed motherhood into her fiercest role. In Rome, every morning began the same. Actress Anna Magnani lifted her son Luca into his wheelchair, kissed his forehead, and promised him strength. The boy had been paralyzed by polio. Magnani was a force of nature on screen. Her performance in The Rose Tattoo earned her an Oscar in the 1950s. But off-screen, she confessed, "I act to feed Luca." Every role she accepted was chosen not for prestige, but for the hospital bills it would cover. Crews recalled her rushing from film sets to sit beside her son as he attempted the smallest motions, stretching a leg, gripping crutches. When pain made him cry out, she bit her lip until it bled, hiding her own tears. On the night of her Oscar win, gossip writers raved about the Italian goddess of tragedy. What they didn't see was that she flew home to Rome, skipped the parties, and bent down to kiss Luca's hair as he sat in his chair. Magnani refused to hide her son. In an era of shame, she defied Hollywood's silence. The depth in her eyes that mesmerized audiences came not from acting, but from motherhood. But for Harold Lloyd, Hollywood's daredevil comedian, family tragedy was something he could never laugh away. He dangled from skyscrapers in safety last, making audiences roar with laughter. But behind the walls of his Beverly Hills estate, Harold Lloyd faced a horror no stunt could match. His daughter, Gloria, showed signs of severe mental illness in the 1940s. One moment she was cheerful, the next she was screaming, smashing objects, or locking herself away. Doctors whispered, "Schizophrenia." Treatments of the era were brutal: heavy sedatives, electroshock therapy. After sessions, she sometimes stared vacantly, unable to recognize even her father. Harold, the man known for fearless stunts, was powerless. He carried her to hospitals, sat by her side, prayed for her recovery. But gossip spread, the daughter of comedy cursed with madness. The family chose silence, locking the pain behind closed doors. Gloria's condition worsened, and Harold withdrew. The man who made millions laugh could not face the truth of his own home. But tragedy wasn't finished with Hollywood. For Jackie Coogan, The world's most famous child star, fate delivered the cruelest symmetry. The world wept when Charlie Chaplin's The Kid premiered in the early 1920s. Little Jackie Coogan became America's first child superstar, earning millions. But by the 1930s, he discovered his parents had squandered his fortune. His lawsuit led to the famous Coogan Law, protecting child actors. Yet fate struck again. When Jackie became a father in the 1950s, one of his children was born with severe neurological disorders. The boy never spoke, never connected, never called him dad. Doctors were blunt. He would forever depend on others for care. The irony was unbearable. Jackie, whose expressive face once melted audiences' hearts, now had a son trapped in silence. He spared no expense, dragging him to specialists across the country, trying speech therapy, controversial treatments, anything. Nothing worked. At gatherings, old Hollywood friends remembered Jackie breaking down after drinks. "They only remember me as Chaplin's boy," he said. "They don't know what I've lost. I lost my childhood, my fortune, and now the voice of my own son." And while Jackie grieved privately, one of Hollywood's most admired marriages kept its own devastating secret hidden for decades. Charles Laughton, the Oscar-winning star of The Private Life of Henry VIII and Elsa Lanchester, unforgettable as the Bride of Frankenstein, were hailed as Hollywood's artistic power couple, but fans wondered why no children. In truth, in the 1930s, they had quietly adopted a baby, but their joy was short-lived. The child was diagnosed with severe birth defects, spinal deformities, speech delays, developmental struggles. In Hollywood, this was considered a career killer. Under studio pressure, they placed the baby in a care facility. From that moment forward, the child ceased to exist in public. Friends later whispered of the grief. Elsa's laughter dimmed at parties when she saw children. Charles, usually commanding, was sometimes found muttering, "I left part of my soul behind." Their secret remained buried until decades later, when historians uncovered the truth. What the world saw as an artistic marriage was really a story of impossible choices and hidden sorrow. And when we look at all these stories together, one truth becomes clear. Dorothy Dandridge, Gene Tierney, Lloyd Nolan, Loretta Young, Paul Newman, Anna Magnani, Harold Lloyd, Jackie Coogan, Charles Laughton, different names, different legends, but every one of them lived through the same heartbreaking reality, being a parent in an era that demanded perfection. Some fought desperately, pouring money, time, and love into treatments that never worked. Others chose silence, deception, or separation, haunted by guilt to their final days. A few, like Nolan and Magnani, defied Hollywood's code, planting seeds for the disability rights movement. In the golden glow of the 1930s through the 1960s, fans saw glamour, elegance, untouchable lives. Yet behind the spotlights were hospital rooms, care facilities, private breakdowns. Fame couldn't protect them from the universal pain of parenthood. These stars were legends on screen, but in their most private moments, they were just mothers and fathers, hearts breaking the same as anyone else. Hollywood wanted to bury these stories, but remembering them strips away the illusion, reminding us that even the brightest stars were human. And sometimes, their greatest performances weren't filmed at all.